What's going on, guys? So I've made many iterations to my player movement and animation over the years, trying to improve every time I learn something new. 6 months into learning, I created my first character and even made a simple idle and walk animation. Using Unity's Animator controller, it worked well as I could easily see the transition between the two animations based on conditions such as isWalking is true or isIdle is true. Then I started working on other systems such as tilling, seeding, and watering for my farming system. All of these actions also require their own animations, which I was able to add to the small Animator Web without much of an issue. It wasn't until I started animations for other actions such as melee combat, range combat, running, crouching, etc., where I started to realize the web was growing out of control very quickly. Everything still worked well gameplay-wise, but it became much more difficult to determine how to organize these actions and transitions from a visual standpoint. So after doing some research on YouTube and the Unity forums, I learned that some developers had created their own animation systems through code. If this was my first year, I would have no idea how to even plan out to accomplish something like this. However, after going through the trial and error phase hundreds of times so far during my game dev journey, I've gained a lot of more confidence in my abilities. What may have seemed like an impossible task a few years ago now seems like a fun challenge. So I started off by planning out everything in a Google document. How many animations will the system need to handle? Which animations will need exit times and which can be canceled in real time? So for example, the run animation should blend between a walk animation before going into idle to prevent it from looking choppy, while a combat action should not have to wait until an idle animation is done before the player can attack. So all these things that I really didn't think about previously, I'm thinking about now for this new system. I've learned it's also critical for this system to work seamlessly with the player input, player movement, and player interaction scripts. For example, the player may press W on the keyboard or move the joystick forward if on console. This will call the player movement.move method, and then based on the vector2 input, for example like 0, 1 or 0, -1, player movement will determine whether to call move forward or move backward. Now, the challenge I had before was determining which animation to play when these were pressed. So for example, when moving forward, the player may input move forward, but the animation may be different depending on the player's current state. So for example, if the player is already in an animation such as swinging a sword or casting a spell, this input should not be accepted in the first place until the animation is complete. Once it actually is accepted, the player is not busy and the input is accepted. If the player moves forward, it has to determine if the player is standing or crouching or swimming. So for example, if he's crouching, he or she should be able to crouch walk forward. So it shouldn't immediately go from crouch to a run. It should be, able to crouch walk. Or if swimming, it shouldn't be running in the water. He or she should, swim forward. So all these things, again, that I've kind of, I don't want to say failed, but yeah, failed and then improved on. I'm learning that. I'm trying to incorporate into my new system with ease. With my new system, the player will always be in one or a few different states, which will determine which methods the player input will call. This will also give me more flexibility when improving combat systems to ensure attacks flow properly rather than look or feel choppy. All in all, this new animation system has the most potential of anything I've done previously. My mind is also a lot calmer, not having to look at that crazy web of animations and condition transitions. For next week, I'll find a better way to trigger collisions for melee combat for all weapon speeds. For example, a dagger or a greatsword, they'll have different contact points because the dagger will have usually a quicker animation than the greatsword. The collider should only trigger while the weapon is being swung. It should not trigger during the backswing or recovery phase. So that's something I got to figure out the best way to do that within my systems. Anyway, this is where I'm currently at with my game dev progress, and as always, thanks for watching. Feel free to comment below.